What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the third and latest season of Chucky. Coming from the mind once again of Don Mancini, you have a returning cast of people like Zachary Arthur, Bjorgvin Arneson, Olivia Lind, Devin Sawa, and of course Brad Dourif, Fiona Dourif, and Jennifer Tilly. So honestly, this is an interesting review to be doing because Chucky, the third season, actually started at the tail end or during the fall actually of 2023, and like a lot of shows that play on cable, ended up going on its mid-season finale. And I thought to myself, I'll just wait till the season comes back. You know, I expected it to be a month and some change or so, like a lot of shows that do mid-season finales. But I was surprised when I never saw Chucky returning, and I saw no return date. And months later, they ended up announcing that it was coming back in April, and I was like, damn, I didn't know they were splitting it in two parts that far apart. I would have done a review for the first part of the season, but it was so far gone by the time I noticed that I was like, okay, I'll just wait until it comes back in April and do a full season review. And I don't fully know why it was delayed so long, why the second part of the season came so much later, but I'm happy that it came back. But I have to imagine it had something to do maybe with the writer strikes and the actor strikes that maybe kind of delayed some of the production of this show, which will lean into some of the criticisms I have of some of the final episodes of the season, as it felt like they had to cut corners in a couple of places or get a little bit inventive to make a couple of these sequences work, where typically you wouldn't really have noticed that or seen that in any of the other seasons that we've seen up to this point. Now, going into this, if you guys aren't already familiar, Chucky is one of my favorite characters of all time. He is my favorite slasher of all time. I love the Chucky movies. They're ridiculous, they're stupid, they're fun, they know what they are, they're incredibly self-aware and meta. And I've always been a huge fan of horror comedy, and the character of Chucky, played by Brad Dourif, has always been one of my favorite horror icons, if not my favorite of all time. I even have the character tattooed on my legs. So after we got that remake movie with Mark Hamill in the role, and we found out we were going to actually continue on the Don Mancini storyline, with Brad Dourif returning, Jennifer Tilly returning, and a bunch of other people like Fiona Dourif, as well as focusing on a new set of characters and having kind of the Cobra Kai style of having a bunch of different actors from various Chucky movies appear over the course of the series. I was all in, and I've enjoyed the show so far. If you guys want to go back, I've already done reviews for all of the Chucky movies as well as the first two seasons of the show. And I would have dropped a review for that first part of the season had I known there was going to be such a big gap, but here we are now touching on it. And yeah, I was excited to get back to a little bit of Chucky. I had missed it in the good few months that it had been gone. And so let's talk about what the base premise of this season is. But to do that, I feel like I kind of need to talk about what the second season ended with. And so if you haven't seen Chucky or you're not up to date, this is probably not the video for you. I'm not going to do a full spoiler play-by-play of everything, as I would be sitting here for way too long. But I do want to kind of talk a little bit openly about the events of this season and some of the things I thought about it. But to do that, like I said, let's touch on what happened at the tail end of the second season. And the most notable thing to know going into this season was the fact that Jennifer Tilly, or Tiffany of course, ended up getting arrested, as she of course was the main one who had kidnapped Caroline, the younger sister to Lexi, played once again by Olivia Lind. And the whole basic gist of this season is that Caroline has gone missing. Chucky and Tiffany are the only ones who know where she is, but of course Tiffany's in prison and they don't know where Chucky is anymore because they've destroyed the dolls that are around them and they have no idea where he could possibly be. But at the very beginning of this season, as they are trying to find a way to find Chucky, they're watching the news only to see the president going into the White House with his family, and their youngest son Henry has himself a little good guy doll, which of course instantly intrigues them, as they know that's got to be Chucky, and that Chucky is now in one of the most guarded places in the entire country. And so now they try to find their way into the White House to try to kill Chucky, find him, or most notably try to get their hands on him to find out where Caroline is. And that's pretty much the inciting incident. That's exactly what gets them excited to go. That's what pushes the story forward. And you once again have people like Zachary Arthur, Bjorgvin Arneson, and Olivia Lind as Jake, Devin, and Lexi working together to go do just that. And so once they end up getting to the White House area or around that area, they end up finding their way in through kind of, you know, manipulating the heart of the oldest son of the president, played by Jackson Kelly, the character of Grant. Eventually, Lexi ends up kind of building a bit of an actual romance with him, but initially it is more to try to get into the White House as they try to use him as a social media influencer, which is kind of funny to think of a president having a social media influencer child. But she ends up kind of using him as her way in so she can try to get their hands on Chucky. And so that's the base premise of this, of course, as you can expect. expect, Chucky in the White House is going to lead to a lot of deaths. There's people getting killed left and right. There are people that are working for the FBI and the CIA that are trying to cover it up the entire time. And one thing that this series has always done that I really thoroughly enjoy is having a lot of the same actors return to play different characters within the same universe. And the most notable one at this point, just for this series, not even tying into the movies, is Devon Sawa, who I first saw originally in Final Destination years ago and never would have expected to have seen him play multiple characters over the course of these 3 seasons on Chucky. In this season, he plays President Collins, the president of the United States. He even plays the double to the president that we meet later on in the season. And in earlier parts of the shows, he's played people like Jake's dad, as well as Jake's uncle, who is a twin to Jake's father, as well as the priest that we saw in the previous season. So yeah, he's played a lot of different characters and has died many times over the course of this season. And following along in that kind of trajectory, you also have Lara Jean Chorostecki, I believe is how you pronounce her name, coming to play Charlotte Collins, the first lady, and she was the nun in the previous season as well. You also have people like Michael Theriault reappearing once again, who I believe first appeared in the series in Cult of Chucky and has now appeared in multiple seasons once again as different characters, and this time around is the vice president. So yeah, Don Mancini just likes having fun with various actors returning throughout the course of the series, playing a bunch of different characters. And I think one of the most fun ways you can actually do that, outside of the way they've already done it, is even through just the character of Jennifer Tilly, who is Tiffany inside the body of Jennifer Tilly, but is just Jennifer Tilly playing Tiffany as herself. And at this point, Jennifer Tilly is pretty much just Tiffany. She's not really an actress who does a whole lot these days when it comes to things outside of the Chucky franchise. So I always am going to just kind of look at Jennifer Tilly and Tiffany as one individual, and I think that this show has a lot of fun with that. And of course, it's fantastic to hear Brad Dourif once again as Chucky in this season. Loved him throughout the entirety of the runtime. There's so many moments that Chucky made me laugh. There's some great Chucky kills throughout it. Plenty of that great over-the-top Chucky laughter and manipulation that he typically does. He's sinister, and in the later part of this season, something I really thoroughly enjoyed was being able to see him in his spirit form, where Brad Dourif gets to play Chucky in his physical form. And some of the creepiest stuff that happens with Chucky in this season is with Brad Dourif in that role. Now, of course, Chucky's always been a lot more goofy and silly, so without a doubt, seeing him in that role, he was definitely hamming it up and having a lot of fun. But it was cool to see Chucky not as a doll for a portion of this, being able to just see Brad Dourif bringing everything he brings to the character. And what's awesome is that Brad Dourif announced during the, kind of releasing of this season that he was retiring from acting except for Chucky. And as a longtime Chucky fan, as a longtime fan of Brad Dourif, I'm really glad that despite him, retiring from acting, as he is an older man at this point, that he's going to keep on pushing on with Chucky. And hopefully at some point they find a good kind of resting point for the character of Chucky, for us to actually have a nice set of finality from all those movies starting in the late 80s all the way to this series that's playing all these years later. It's just amazing that they've been able to continue one storyline, bring back majority of the actors, and maintain Brad Dourif as Chucky. And I hope that we're able to have a nice set of conclusion maybe in the next season with Brad Dourif as this character. One character that didn't really get a whole lot of screen time in this season, I was actually surprised by that, was Fiona Dourif as Nika, of course, who has appeared originally in Curse of Chucky and has reappeared over the course of this show. She was also in Cult of Chucky, and she's a character I've always thoroughly enjoyed. Fiona Dourif, of course, the daughter of Brad Dourif, and in previous seasons, not only has she played Nika, but she's also played a younger version of Charles Lee Ray in flashbacks, where she gets to play her father in makeup, which I thought was pretty cool. She also gets to do that here in the spiritual realm in this season, and I thought it was a lot of fun to see her in that. But as far as the character of Nika, who I feel like I'm most invested with, it was a shame that she was kind of just relegated to the very end of the season. It seems like she's going to be a bigger player in the next season, but yeah, I was a little disappointed to get to the end of the season and feel like Fiona Dourif wasn't really in the season much. And I can ultimately say that I think that this season of Chucky for me was probably my least favorite of the 3. Not to say that I disliked it in any way, shape, or form. I did enjoy the season, but I think that the first 2 had a little bit more of a streamlined, packaged feel to them, with them kind of setting up for exciting things for the next season. Whereas season 3, while it did a lot of cool, fun things with the White House premise, ultimately at a certain point felt like a lot of episodes that felt just a little bit samey. You have Chucky killing somebody, you have people in the White House trying to cover it up for government reasons. You kind of get to see a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes with the government, some stuff that probably genuinely happens, some shady stuff happens and they just cover it up. And they add more of a supernatural element to this season, but a lot of the season felt like characters not believing each other, that something weird was happening, covering up a lot of deaths, and ultimately would kind of push the story forward in small ways with big key moments typically near the end of the episodes. But outside of big key deaths that happened throughout the course of the season, there was kind of a bit of a samey feel throughout the entirety when I look at the entire picture, where it was just really about trying to find where Caroline was the entire season and Chucky killing people inside of the White House. And one of the most notable things about Chucky killing people this time around is that he's actually dying as he finds out that he actually offended Damballa, his god, by kind of being exercised in the last season with Catholicism. And so since he was dealing with something with Catholicism, even though it was out of his hands, he's now kind of been shunned by Damballa, who's given him the power to do all the voodoo possessions that he's had the opportunity to do all these years. And so now he's kind of at a place where he has to kind of impress Damballa and kill people in magnificent ways in order for him to get the chance to then once again imbue himself into a body that will not decay and die. And so I thought that was fun. It was cool to see him withering away over the course of the season. I thought that Brad Dourif brought a lot of humor to that, and a lot of the writing that Don Mancini brought into the mix definitely was a lot of fun. But I do think that at certain points in the season, they may have gone a little bit too overboard when it comes down to the bonkers elements. That is part of the fun of the Chucky franchise, and I always typically enjoy that. But I do think there was an element of this season that sometimes felt like it went a little bit too far, especially in the finale, as we see that Jake, Lexi, and Devin ultimately are kind of like trapped in these small doll bodies. We don't fully see how that happens, but it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of escape that in the next season. And there was just a couple of things with the spiritual realm and just even leaning into more of a supernatural element in this show with Ghost that maybe came off a little bit too goofy at times. Still enjoyable, but a little bit goofy. But yeah, I think as an overall, my thoughts on the season were that it was fun. I enjoyed seeing these characters again. I think there's some great Chucky moments, some great Chucky kills, but ultimately I just look at the 8 episodes and feel like not as much happened as the events that you see in the first and second season, which equally have 8 episodes. I feel like this season just felt a little bit less eventful. There were some cool kills, there were some cool, revelations narratively, but it didn't feel like it pushed the story forward as much. And one area that I definitely felt that way with was with Jennifer Tilly as Tiffany, who is in prison and that she's going to be executed because of everything that's happened in the previous stories. And ultimately, a lot of the season with her is just her slowly using voodoo in the prison to kind of turn all the guards to kind of like be her servants, so to speak. And ultimately, this is how she's able to escape her execution in the end. But they didn't really feel like they knew what to do with Jennifer Tilly in this season. It felt like she was just kind of relegated to these funny little scenes where we see her in prison, where we see that she's gaining more control over the guards and using voodoo and kind of becoming more comfortable in prison. And ultimately, that's about it. It doesn't really feel like they do much with her until the very end, where we see that her and Chucky are now going to get married finally after all these years. They do mention Glenn and Glenda as well, as it seems like maybe they'll be a bigger part of the next season. And now both of them are back officially in a Chucky doll and a Tiffany doll. And so it seems like we're going to kind of get back to basics with the events of the next season. They're finally kind of in a place where like they're free of all the burdens and all the danger that they've been in over the course of the season. But a lot of that, especially around Jennifer Tilly's character, felt very convenient, and it never really felt like anything where there was a grand sense of stakes. That's going to be my thoughts on season 3 of Chucky, guys. I overall thought it was a lot of fun to watch. Something that's interesting is that at the very end of the show, like I mentioned before, it did feel that there was a couple of moments with like really noticeable green screen. There's also a sequence very, very much at the end where you have Jennifer Tilly standing next to a Chucky doll, and it was clear that they added the Chucky doll in later on digitally. Like it is a physical doll that they had, animated and kind of recorded, but then they added it into the scene kind of digitally later on. And so there was a couple of moments in those final few episodes where it felt like maybe they had to cut cost, or maybe there was an issue with production. And then the show ends with Chucky essentially popping up on screen with a number that says, call this number to pretty much tell the studio that you want a 4th term with a 4th season. And I actually called the number, and it's pretty much just Chucky, voicemail from Chucky, and he says, hey, thanks for calling this number, but you should text, this number back and say this, and it's pretty much telling the studio, hey, I want another season. So I wonder if their budget got cut, moving into this season, and maybe the numbers for this show haven't been all that great, and now they're kind of at a place where they kind of have to ask the audience to beg the studio to give them another season. I hope that's not the case, but it very much feels that way, like they don't necessarily have the faith that this is going to be a series that's going to continue on, but hopefully it does. It ends in a funny way, but ultimately there is a feeling that they didn't fully know what to do with this season and how to end it 100%, but I am excited to see what they do moving forward. We do see at the very end of this season that Caroline is full on evil at this point. She wants to be a murderer alongside Tiffany and Chucky. And so Lexi is heartbroken. And this is also part of kind of what I was saying before about where it felt like there wasn't as much of a vision with the whole season, because the whole show this time around was about Lexi, Jake, and Devin finding their way to try to find where Caroline is in this season. And they manipulate people, and they're just talking about where's Caroline, where's Caroline, where's Caroline. We don't see Caroline until the last episode. And ultimately she's like, yeah, I just want to kill people with Chucky and Tiffany. And then we trap Lexi, Devin, and Jake into these doll bodies at the very end of the show. And that's about it. So there was a part of me that made me think they maybe could have done a few other things. I understand Caroline being like a big focal point for them to go save her. Maybe she should have appeared earlier in the season to kind of add some complexity to the fact that Lexi, maybe could realize like my sister doesn't want to be saved, but instead the whole season is about saving her, only for them to ultimately find her not want to be saved and then be captured. And it just begged the question that they maybe could have done a little bit more with the season. And plenty of enjoyment to be had still. I laughed plenty. I was impressed by a lot of the kills. I enjoyed a lot of the practical effects, guts, gore. I loved the look of the season. It's great to spend time with Brad Dourif as Chucky. Great to spend time as Jennifer Tilly as Tiffany. Great to see Nika Pierce, even if it's very brief, with Fiona Dourif in the role. There was all that great stuff I really enjoyed. And as far as the main three leads that, Jake, Devin, and Lexi, enjoyed them. I enjoyed the new character, Grant Collins, the oldest son of the president. It was great to see Devin Sawa, as I mentioned, playing all these different roles. And I think everybody seems like they're having fun in these roles. But when I look at the season as a whole, and I really just, sat back and thought about it, and I watched the final episode yesterday, and I kind of just took some time and just sat with the episode and my thoughts on the overall season, I think I can confidently say that it's my least favorite of the 3 seasons. Still a good time. I enjoyed the 8 episodes, but I do feel, again, that there was kind of like a lack of payoff for most things that happened in the season. And then, again, characters like Jennifer Tilly are just kind of on the side. You got a couple of scenes here and there to kind of show what she's doing, but she's stuck in a prison cell, and that's about it. There's really not much to her character and the events around her. And I think that season 1 and season 2 just did a great job of keeping things flowing in a cool, fun way. You have all these characters in different places, and it just never really felt like this season had as much fun stuff going on. Just a little bit more of a streamlined kind of approach to what they were trying to do, but it ultimately kind of culminated in something I wasn't as crazy about. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but a big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts down below. Did you like this season of Chucky? Did you not like the season of Chucky? Whatever the case may be, I'll see all you beautiful people in the next one. See you later. Bye-bye.